Considering when I said we need to get started, nobody listened. I thought maybe the gavel might get your attention. All right. If you're not part of the discussion on the use of drone panel, then you can exit the room. I know legislators will be trickling back in. They went out to get some refreshments.
How you doing? Hey, good. Hey, David.
But we have a very timely topic, so I want to get started. I am Matt Lehman, State Representative from Indiana, former NCOL President, and the moderator of this general session. We have a great panel joining us today to discuss a very timely, interesting topic, and that is the insurer's use of aerial imaging impacting policyholders across the country. And it is indeed timely. If you've watched any of the news, read articles, there's articles in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, that are making headlines. It's fair to say that if you take away the broader issue of overhaul affordability and availability issues, which is now penetrating our market around home and auto, this issue that we'll be discussing today is one of the most talked about and related issues over the last several months. Several insurance departments have issued guidance on the matter. Louisiana actually passed a law on the issue that will be referenced today. A copy of that law is on your binders on page 52 and on the website and on the app. Also on the website and the app, distributed before you are some suggestions from one of our speakers today, Amy Bach from the United Policyholders, as to what a policy response might look like on this issue. Given this flurry of activity, now is a great time to dedicate some time to discussing this issue, and we'll see what the policymakers should consider moving forward. I'll also note that it's likely that following this session, there will be a draft of an NCOL model law developed and ready for distribution at our November meeting in San Antonio. There will be time for some questions and answers when we're done, but we're going to hear from the panel first. So let us join us today in these discussions is David Tobias, co-founder and COO of BetterView, David Barstow, Senior VP and GM of Insurance at EagleView, Matt Overturf, Regional VP at the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, Amy Bach, Executive Director of United Policyholders, and Carl Sussman, President of Sussman Insurance Agency. To learn more about these speakers, you can view their bios in the program and also on the app. I urge all of you to reach out to them afterwards and learn from them about what these important issues are and their positions. So, without further ado, let's get started. We'll first hear from David Tobias. So, Mr. Tobias, go ahead.
All right. Everybody hear me? Good. Well, thank you, everybody. Excited to be here, and I think it's super important and timely issue, as you mentioned, and appreciate the time to share some of our experiences and thinking on the matter. I am, as mentioned, the co-founder of a company called BetterView, which was acquired by an aerial imagery company called Nearmap in December of last year. So a little bit on my background, which I think will be timely for the discussion today. Prior to that, I owned an insurance inspection company. So my father had started an inspection company, boots on the ground, about 500 inspectors across the country. In that business, I fundamentally was trying to solve this roof data problem, and we struggled with inspectors to do so. And that was originally when we started BetterView. At the forefront of BetterView, it was around using drones originally to go capture this, and I've actually been to NCOIL once before, many years ago, discussing drones. Today, though, we pivoted that company and ultimately combined forces with a manned aerial company. So I just want to call one caveat to this is we're not really talking about drone imagery, at least from my side today. We're talking about manned aerial imagery. So this is planes with cameras in them, manned planes, not drones. So I just want to make sure we draw that distinction. I think, I'm not going to spend much time on this. You all know these issues very, very well, what we're facing as an industry. We're more severe weather events. Every carrier I work with now, no matter where they are in the country, is a CAT carrier. And that used to not be the case. We used to talk to carriers that wrote in CAT zones, and there was CAT-specific carriers. Today, pretty much every region, every state is dealing with more severe and more frequent weather events. As a company, we've flown 26 severe weather events this year so far. We just flew the extreme windstorms in Illinois. And so it's just happening every week now. So we're all dealing with this. The traditional way of zoning and using area-based models seems to be falling short, for consumers, right? And California is one example of that around wildfire. But this ability to just say that one particular area is of high risk and that there isn't good risk within that or risks that can be mitigated, I think is changing. I think people's theories on that are changing. And ultimately, the answer, in my view, to this is to get to more of a predict and prevent mindset. How do we use data, analytics, imagery, and other sources to help recommend to insureds what they can do to improve their risk? Most insureds do not want to have a loss, right? And we as an industry, I think, as an insurance industry and data providers into that industry can do more to be proactive to predict and prevent loss. So some examples of this, and we'll use wildfire. This is the River Fire from 2020, and this is our manned aerial imagery from before the event, which you can see on the left here, and then overlaid with some data and analytics, right? Specifically, automated defensible space zones. So this uses computer vision to determine how much defensible space there is around an individual property. These two homes were obviously exposed to the same event, right? So similar wind speeds, similar elevation profile, and obviously the same wildfire. And you can see the defensible space of the top building where it says 4, good defensible space around this building. So insured was being proactive, created defensible space zones, and they had a better outcome than the building below that had low defensible space. These type of tools can be used to help insureds predict and prevent, right? And I think aerial imagery can be a key component in that. It's only one component of many, but it can be a key component. To do this, though, I think from our side on the aerial imagery, we need to provide high-resolution imagery. So you can see our NearMap imagery over on the right where it says aerial. That's from our manned aircraft versus satellite imagery. I thought it'd be helpful for the group to think about some of these things. Manned aerial is very different than satellite, much higher resolution. So if I zoom in a little bit, and this is the Capitol building, just for those of you who are interested, you can see the level of detail that 4.4 manned aerial imagery will give you. That's the level of detail versus satellite. So I think important to understand the distinctions between satellite and manned aerial. The other thing that I think is really important to this topic is the frequency of that imagery. So we talk about the Louisiana regulation, that says the imagery needs to be 24 months or less in vintage. So it needs to be relatively recent. I would argue, which maybe sounds strange coming from my side, that doesn't go far enough. I think 12 months or less should be more where we look at being recent enough to be used for decision making. But the other thing that you think about with frequency is what you can do with it. A lot of conversation goes around how aerial imagery can be used to change premium or change policy decisions in a potentially negative way for insureds. Many carriers are using it in a positive way. So this is an example where the building, the roofs got better. You can see 2022, January, May 2022, and then December all the way on the right. This particular homeowner replaced their roof, put a better roof on, put a new roof on, and actually took off the solar panels. So in this particular case, the insurer offered better rates proactively to the insured. So this is an example of how this type of information, this type of data and analytics and aerial imagery can be used to a net benefit to the consumer. And I think this doesn't get discussed enough, and I think there's a lot more that can be done around this. From the industry side, from the aerial imagery and analytics side, I think it behooves us and it is on us to be transparent around what we're doing. So I call them, instead of black box models, I call them glass box models because you can see into them and see what these models are doing. And to do that, although we're obviously using computer vision or AI to look at the imagery and determine certain detections, we show all those detections. So if somebody got a low score or the roof showed that it was in poor condition, you can always go back to the imagery and the AI on that imagery and see exactly what the computer saw. You can see it saw a missing shingle. You can see it saw damage on the roof or tree overhang or whatever the thing is. So I think that's really important, that the AI is transparent. I think it's important that as an industry, that companies like mine are willing to show the performance of these computer vision models, of these AI models. And we do this and we publish it. And that we really empower sharing in our tools, in our platforms, in our software to go to the insured, to the agents, right? We empower insurers to make this really easy to share these type of details with insureds and agents. So those are some things that we think, at least at Nearmap, are very important that we provide for. We also think it behooves us to be a good steward of this data and analytics, that we work with state departments of insurance. So we have proactively gone and filed scores that we've created with different DOIs. And you can see where we're pending in some and where are filed. And there's 37 other states we're filing our wind and hail score in right now. So we worked with Milliman, which Milliman, independent, third-party actuarial firm, to validate our models as a third party, and then help us go work with state regulators to file these scores. So we think it's really important that we work with the industry, work with regulators like the folks in this room to show how these work, right? How do they work? What's the lift, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've done that so far around wildfire, hurricane, and wind and hail. The other thing to keep in mind is this type of aerial imagery is being used to help people recover in severe weather events. I mentioned we've flown about 26 severe weather events so far this year, and many of our carrier customers are using this to help get insureds back on their feet quickly. So this is obviously very recent from Beryl in Texas. You can see the pre-event imagery and the post-event imagery. And carriers were using this within minutes of it being published to help cut checks, to help get people back on their feet, to send resources, whether that means claims adjusters, send preemptive. We had carriers using this type of data to preemptively send checking account deposits to people so they could get hotel rooms. So I think it's important to think about how this aerial imagery is being used to really help people as well as in rate and decision making. And this is just some more examples, post-CAT, so you can see the pre and the post with the AI detections on it, right? And so this is the type of thing that carriers are doing with it, right? And they're really doing it so they can react better and faster to severe weather events for their insureds. And so, just some data points to think about as we have more discussion on this. But that's my short presentation. Hopefully, I hope set some framework for some great conversation, and look forward to some of the other panelists and discussion afterwards. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Whoever wants to go next? Amy?
Sure. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come to an NCOIL meeting. I do get to interface with state insurance regulators on a regular basis at the NAIC, and it's so great to see the two organizations working in collaboration and seeing the different approaches that are being taken to tackle the issues of the day. So you heard my name, Amy Bach. I run a nonprofit organization. It's a national group. We are in our 33rd year of being a source of information, guidance for consumers on buying insurance, using insurance, and then we do our best to contribute to solving problems at the public policy level. So I think last year, I was at an NAIC meeting. I was sitting with Kentucky Commissioner Sharon Clark, and she was sharing a story about a consumer that had come to her agency and said they had been non-renewed, dropped, which is the way consumers, that's the word they use, based on satellite images. So it was very interesting to see the distinction between the satellite image and and the manned drone image. And then her staff went to the insurer and said, gee, these are pretty grainy. I don't think you should be drawing conclusions based on the quality of this image. And so then the insurer came back with some more granular images, and she felt that she really couldn't really argue the roof was clearly in very poor condition. So it was sort of like, oh, okay. She had shared it. I think there had been maybe one article, and then suddenly there was just this storm of media attention. So if we can go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. There we go. So I've already said who we are and what we do. I do want to tell all of you as public officials that our organization very frequently responds to requests from public officials to help with educating consumers. And so we have RAC cards that we put out that are very kind of for the short attention span, how to insure what to think about when you're insuring your home and all that. So we are always open to sharing those publications with your district offices and for the service of your folks. And we have a website that has a 50-state consumer help map with all kinds of free resources, all aimed at helping consumers understand insurance issues. So that's me, and you already heard I'm involved with the NAIC. I'm also on the Federal Advisory Committee on Insurance. And I think I speak for everybody in this room when I say we are all united in wanting to have households be prepared for and resilient to disasters. We are all united in wanting to see people have insurance in place that's going to indemnify them in the event of a loss. And we're all mindful of what has been happening in the marketplace. It's impacting more and more states. We're based in California, but we work a lot in disaster-impacted states. So we have worked in Texas, we have worked in New York, we have worked in Colorado, on and on and on. And so we're all here because, A, there's been a firestorm of media attention on insurers' use of aerial imagery and what that's meaning for the consumer. And I like to think that we are also all on the same page, that we'd like to see the technology that insurers are using bring some benefits to consumers. Because right now it feels like consumers are just getting pummeled by what I sometimes call TMI, right? Insurers went from not caring if you had your gutters were clogged with pine needles to the complete other end of the spectrum where one pine needle might even get you in trouble. So it's really, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but we've gone from insurers blindly insuring properties to where we are now, and that has really kind of been on a collision course with the increasingly severe weather events, severe convective storms that insurers say they were not quite reinsuring for, and all the other problems that we're having. So it has been obviously in the news quite a bit. That's why we're here talking about it. And some states have already taken some action. And what I would really like us to think about and talk about today, I have a couple slides with the actions. There was a bill that became law in Louisiana. There's a very valuable bulletin that the state of Pennsylvania put out. But what my team did is we took what we thought were the best ideas that have been out there, and we put them in these 4 points. I'd like there to be discussion. I'm always open to if somebody says that's a bad idea, okay, fine. But what we're trying to do here is find the medium so that the non-renewals are reasonable and that people get a chance to remedy the condition that's been identified while we scurry as fast as we can to get more mitigation funding available to households to replace roofs and do the things that we know we want them to do. So we already heard the previous speaker say that the images should be at least 12 months or more recent. We know the Louisiana law says 24 months for, that's how old the image can be for it to be legit, to be used, right? So we have an issue there. Should it be, how recent should the photos be in order to be dispositive? So we say require an insurer to provide a consumer with copies of date-stamped images so that we know that it's not a super old photo, right? And then we go on, because risk scoring is such a big deal in California, to say, tell the consumer their risk score and explain it to them. Why are you a 5? Why are you a 10? And what can you do to reverse that decision? We also propose requiring an insurer to provide an appeal process so the consumer can correct any errors. So in the case of, that's not damaged roof tiles, that's my solar panel, or that's not my home address, or what have you, that they can offer. And that, of course, the more granular the image, the easier it is for there not to be those kind of mistakes. Third, requiring the insurer to give the consumer a reasonable time period to cure the defects or conditions underlying the non-renewal or new application rejection. I don't think that's super controversial. I think the fourth one is the trickiest one, right? Require the insurer to offer a new or renewal policy to the consumer who submits proof that they've cured the defects or conditions identified. Obviously, that one is the most controversial because it does go to mandatory underwriting and is something that will get, that's going to be a big bone of contention. So, let me just quickly, let me go through these, the two things. So here's the Pennsylvania Bulletin. You won't be able to read the writing. But basically, we're talking about giving the consumer an explanation and an opportunity to cure conditions identified in the aerial images, and then having, Pennsylvania has some very good, valuable non-renewal protections in place for consumers, and then the Louisiana bill, which is now law, and I know a number of folks who are here at the conference were part of carrying that bill and getting it through, and it does set this limit of that the images have to have been taken in the last 2 years. And then it distinguishes between the using those images for a cancellation or non-renewal versus using them for other reasons. So those are the two measures that I know of that are already in existence. So, Chairman Lehman, if you want to, go through, however you want to do this conversation. If you want to go through my 4 suggestions,
Well,
I'm here to
if we
help.
may, Amy, we'll get to that here. I think that's been distributed to the committee, and we'll
Great.
ask those questions at the end. So
Great.
We need
Well,
to keep moving on.
That's great. Well, then that's pretty much what I wanted to go through. Is we've got this situation. I think as elected officials, my guess is if you haven't heard of this problem from a constituent, you're going to. I think there's been a lot of hype about it, and now we have to get down to the nitty-gritty of what are we going to do about it. And here's the information on my organization's website. Those are some of the examples of the publications that we will make available. And the last thing I want to say is it is troubling to me, that insurers are non-renewing people on the basis of identifying what may be cosmetic damage to a roof when they are so busy inserting exclusions in their policies for cosmetic damage. So which is it? Is it significant or is it not, right? So I think the challenge here is that there's all this new technology, and I know it's the bells and whistles, and insurers are really embracing the technology very quickly, and we have to try to find a balance and bring it back to give the consumer an opportunity to stay protected, and that's what I think I'd like us to be doing here. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Just a reminder, everybody, that all these slides are at our app or online. So we'll move on to Matt Overturf with NAMIC.
Thank you, Representative Lehman. Matt Overturf on behalf of the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. I do not have slides, just some verbal comments, so I'll walk through those and we'll go from there. So first, the use of aerial imagery is not new. Aerial imagery typically includes satellites, fixed-wing aircraft, and unmanned aerial systems, aka drones. Aerial images are used to assess damage after disaster, reduce crime, value properties, aid in urban planning and resource management. Often are used in both the public and private sector. That includes local, state, federal governments and agencies, our friends at Apple and Google. Fun fact, Google Earth was established in 2002, which I learned in preparing for this. News and weather stations and insurers, which obviously we're here to talk about. Aerial imagery covers 85 to 90% of residential homes in the United States at least annually. More densely populated areas are photographed more frequently. Insurers of all sizes are using aerial images to assess risks and claims. This may include underwriting, rating, and monitoring disasters on the front end, along with inspections, claim adjudication, and fraud prevention and loss on the back end. Aerial images often provided by third-party vendors can help spot potential hazards such as yard debris, unfenced pools, trampolines, standalone sheds, whether or not the property owner remembered to disclose them at the application of coverage. Third-party vendors often file and seek approval of their systems and processes through the Departments of Insurance and use in the insurance process. Control like these exist to help ensure that the consideration of the severity of the presence of the combination of factors that help to classify risks are appropriately vetted. They also play a key role in better understanding the shape, size, material, condition of a roof, particularly signs of existing damage like tarps, ponding water, missing shingles, organic debris, or large patchwork repairs, which is especially crucial aspect in understanding the potential impact of extreme weather on a home. They can also, they can also help identify less obvious predictors of future loss, such as overgrown trees, moss, roof discoloration, and streaking, which are often correlated with poor maintenance and age. Modern aerial imaging technology offers a level of detail and accuracy not previously available to carriers. It also enhances fairness because it facilitates the use of consistent standards to evaluate properties across neighborhoods and types of properties. The images can represent an objective measure of a property that can help identify changes to the underlying risk a policyholder is seeking to insure. On the claims side, turnaround time on claims can be reduced by days or even weeks, which can be critical in engaging contractors for repair work. Insurers using drones and aerial images can get the necessary images and data in 20 minutes or less, without an adjuster risking personal safety to inspect the damage. The images can then be transmitted to the insurance company, where the damage can be assessed and the claim process started. According to the Insurance Innovations Reporter, property claims investigation costs the industry an average of 11% percent of premium. Automated inspection can reduce that expense significantly. Aerial imagery is often less than a quarter of the cost to order a review than a traditional inspection. Automated property inspection cycle times can average 2 to 3 days as compared to the 10 to 15 days using traditional methods, lowering costs and increasing consumer satisfaction. With respect to policy determinations, cancellations and non-renewals of policies are already subject to state laws and regulations provisions regardless of how the determination was made. These provisions may limit the reasons an insurer can cancel or non-renew a policy and require notification to the policyholder. So for example, since we're here in California, California requires a 20-day notice on cancellation and a 75-day notice on non-renewal. Florida is another example. It requires 120 days notice on both. And since Representative Lehman is chairing this general session, Indiana has a 20-day notice requirement. So to conclude, insurance companies should be able to view and inspect the property they are insuring to assess its condition. Aerial images can be a valuable tool on that assessment and should not only be permitted but encouraged by policymakers as they enhance fairness and improve accuracy. Thank you.
All right, let's move to David Bairstow with Eagle View.
Thanks, Dave. Great, thank you. So, can you hear me okay? All right, so thank you for having me here today. I'm David Bairstow from Eagle View. I am going to zip through a couple of slides. I think Dave and I have some natural overlap as we're both fundamentally aerial imagery companies. So Eagle View, just to hit on the point that aerial imagery is not a particularly new technology. We've been around for around 25 years. We have a deep patent portfolio and work across lots of different sectors. So what I was going to spend a little bit more time on, because Dave has gone deep on the insurance side, is just a little bit of a broader perspective on other use cases for aerial imagery. So EagleView kind of grew up selling aerial imagery to local county governments to help the tax assessor's office, to help with emergency 911 responses and catastrophic event planning. So from a tax assessment perspective, it's essentially looking at changes in property structure by comparing images over time at a given property. And there's consistency in that in terms of the process. And there's also safety issues in terms of you don't have to send tax assessors out all across your county. So it saves time, money, and there's some safety to that. On the roofing side, and I'll get into that I think on the next slide a little bit, but we help provide a standard for accurate, consistent measurements in the roofing industry, which again ultimately helps the homeowner by reducing the friction between the insurance carrier and the contractor in terms of what it's going to cost to replace a roof. We have interesting applications for solar, where based on our imagery and 3D modeling, we can calculate the amount of solar potential on every facet of your roof, and that helps with solar planning and installation, and the list goes on and on. But lots of well-tested, critical to kind of fundamental work processes where we see aerial imagery already deeply embedded. So Dave hit on the sort of current state of the insurance industry, so I think I'm going to skip that. So at EagleView, one of our core businesses within the insurance space is supporting the claims process and fundamentally around measurements. So we take views from straight above a property as well as all four sides at oblique angles, which allows us to create a 3D model of pretty much every property in the US and then provide very precise measurements against them. What that has allowed the industry to do, as I said before, it reduces the friction between the two sides of the debate and moves the process along much faster. So it doesn't require anybody to go out and visit the property to get measurements. It doesn't ask somebody to get up on a roof and lean over the edges with a tape measure. That's something that has become obsolete with these types of measurements. Dave already touched on disaster response. So again, it's really a powerful tool in helping insurance carriers deal with the worst possible time for homeowners and property owners and get the right resources to the right places in a timely manner and get the flow of funds going. We can help with damage detection, and Matt touched on this before, but I think one of the things that resonates with homeowners that we talk to as well as the carriers is just a standard, consistent process of inspection. So if you're sending individual people up onto a roof to take some pictures and draw a test square, you're gonna, the quality, the level of experience that each of those adjusters have is gonna vary dramatically. With aerial imagery, you can capture and analyze every roof exactly the same way, which makes it easier to make sure you're following best practices in industry standards. And likewise, there's a lot that you can learn from high-resolution aerial imagery. Dave's example showing the distinction between satellite imagery and imagery that's flown at a lower altitude with powerful cameras is really important. So if you get down to a drone flying around an individual house doing an inspection, the resolution gets even greater. But I think for the majority of this topic, we're really talking about that fixed wing aerial imagery that can capture things like this and allow you to zoom in and see a lot of really productive information. So I'll just leave it here. I know we've covered a lot of these topics already, but there are tremendous homeowner benefits in terms of efficiency, standardization, overall lower costs, right? So if you lower the cost of claims with the efficiencies that you can gain, if you're not requiring as many expensive physical inspections, the costs overall come out and the understanding of risk should go up, which allows for the fair assignment of risk across a portfolio. So I'll just leave it there. I'm really looking forward to the discussion afterwards. And again, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And Carl, you are the cleanup hitter here.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I guess they was already handing the microphone to me. He's like, well, it's got to be this guy. Everybody else is gone. Normally, I have to read the room before I start speaking because when the insurance guy starts talking, everyone starts to go to sleep, but everyone here knows what they signed up for. This is an insurance event, right? So we'll jump right into it. So first, just to introduce myself, I'm Carl Sussman. I'm an insurance agency owner for going on 30 years now. Yes, I started when I was 5. I also work as an insurance expert witness in litigation cases for state court, criminal court, and federal court as well. And I also am the host of a talk radio show about, you can guess, insurance that's syndicated on about 9 or 10 markets right now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're experiencing in the industry right now, what we're seeing in the field, what we're seeing talking to consumers, because that's all I do is I talk to consumers every day. They're calling in my agency. We have thousands of clients. They're calling the radio station. They're asking questions. They want to know what's going on with this. So based on my experience, let me fill you in a little bit about what it is that we're experiencing. But I think what's important for me to point out first, and I forgot, I apologize, which of the Davids said it first, that inspections are nothing new. This is something that's always been done. When an insurance company is insuring a property, they're going to go and look at the property. That's just part of the process. Now, in the past, it was done one of different ways. It might have been done by agents like myself. I can remember having to go out to properties with the little wheelie thing, and you'd walk around the house, and the thing would turn the numbers, and you would get the perimeter of the house. Some of you were smiling. You know what I'm talking about. And we used to have to do this. And consumers didn't love it. They didn't love having us come out and do it, but this was part of the process. Later, some of the insurance companies realized that maybe it's better if they do it internally. They would send their own people out. And as you can imagine, consumers didn't love that either. They figured, oh, this guy is on the insurance company payroll. He's going to look for every little thing. This isn't going to be a good idea. So the insurance industry responded and said, okay, we'll get third parties to come out and do this. So there were companies that would begin to be hired, like these companies we've talked about previously, that would come out and do the inspections. Unfortunately, some of these would provide less than stellar experiences for the consumers. And I can speak of some personally that I've heard from clients, people that are showing up unannounced, people that are showing up after sending a random text message that says, I'm coming to see your house because of your agent. Just it's not a good experience for the consumer. I've had some inspectors call our office saying that they've been chased off their property with a gun. So third-party inspectors, it's definitely a difficult job, putting it mildly, for the inspectors, and I think it's definitely troublesome at putting it mildly for consumers because they have a stranger that's coming, it's invasive, they don't know what they're looking for, what they're doing, who are they paid for. So moving on to what do consumers think about these inspections, of course, they're not big fans. They feel that their homes are being inspected because they're trying to find something. The carrier wants to find a reason to either not write the policy or cancel the policy or non-renew the policy. Amy's right. They love calling it dropped. I was dropped. Nobody gets dropped. They get canceled or non-renewed, but I've given up on that battle. It's dropped, it's dropped. So consumers don't like, in general, having their house inspected. They think that something is being done, something nefarious is going on to try and find a way to not insure them. They're not sure why it has to be done. Right? We have all this technology. Why is it that we have to have somebody come and look at my house? So they're feeling that their privacy is invaded. So again, the industry pivoted and said, all right, we have all this great technology, right? We're all carrying it around. We all have a phone with us. Let's let the consumers do the inspections themselves. So they tried out something new. It's called self-inspections. And some insurance carriers are doing this now. And they will provide a link to consumers, and they will either open up an app or they'll go to a website, and it will tell them, it'll say, go to this part of the house, take a picture. Go to this part of the house, take a picture. They walk around the house. Sometimes they're taking short videos. Now, it sounds like a great idea because we're eliminating the stranger coming to the house. We're eliminating the employee of the insurance company with the agenda. The problem is consumers are smart too. And if there's an area that doesn't look so good, it just might not show in that picture. It just happens, if you can believe that. So the lack of compliance we started to see in that, because we would have an inspection that was done by the insured, and then maybe a year or two later, another inspection would be done by either a third party or some other method, and all of a sudden there were things that were clearly there 3 years ago that they were finding. So the industry is still working on self-inspections, but consumers are smart, right? And they know if there's something that shouldn't be seen, they don't want to be seen, somehow it mysteriously doesn't show up in those photos. So we're talking about drone and we're talking about aerial imaging right now in general. And I'm going to step it back even further because we're not just talking about drones, we're not just talking about satellite, we're not just talking about aerial imaging. We're talking about Google Maps. We're talking about Google Street View. We're talking about literally anything that can happen where a property is looked at by an insurance company without actually stepping foot on the property. I take it as globally as that, and I think that encompasses everything that we're talking about. And I think that if this had been rolled out properly, we would not even be having this conversation because it really is a good thing for everybody. It eliminates the problems that consumers have been complaining about and insurance companies have been complaining about forever as far as inspections are concerned. The carriers have complained about getting bad information. The consumers have complained about the invasion of privacy. So this seems perfect, right? Nobody comes to your house. We just have the information we need magically. The problem is the industry failed horrifically in rolling this technology out. Number one, they didn't tell anybody about it. That's never a good way to start, right? And even as agencies, we were being told your client's being non-renewed because of, we're talking roofs. Okay, the roof. And we'd say, okay, how do you know that? Oh, we know. We were literally told that. We just know. And it took months before they would say, well, yes, we're using some technology. And then they would finally say, well, yes, we're using Google Maps. And then we'd say, all right, well, can we get a copy of that? And as are in some of the drafts that Amy's presenting, these would be images that were taken 4 years ago, 3, 5 years, I mean, ridiculous. And so we had to go back to the consumer and say, yeah, your roof was in bad shape, here's the picture. And they'd say, that was 4 years ago, we redid the roof last year. But again, the messaging was so bad because at this point, as we've all heard, consumers are thinking, oh, they're looking to get me. They thought they got me. Now I have to go back and defend myself. So the messaging, the way the industry rolled it out was just horrific. And again, we're sort of playing cleanup at this point. But what we need are guidelines. We need guidelines that consumers will understand and the insurance carriers will understand really benefit everybody. Because I'll let you in on an industry secret. Insurance companies would prefer you never to have a claim. That would be their favorite thing. And consumers would love never to have a loss. So we're really on the same page with this. What we need to do is we need to find a way to be able to have the insurance carriers use this technology, whether it be the satellite, the aerial, the drone, Google Maps, Google Street View, however it might be, but to utilize that information to be able to provide it to the consumers and say, hey, look, you're going to have a roof leak. I mean, I can see the pooling on your roof, and here's when it was, and whether it's a 12-month-old photo or a 24-month. Personally, I would say it should be within a month. It should be as up-to-date as possible. If you're non-renewing me today, then the risk better look like that today, not 6 months ago, not 12 months ago. It should look like that right now. And again, with the cost savings that we have, the carriers are talking about, it shouldn't be difficult to have another company come out and do a flyover an area every few months. That doesn't sound unreasonable. It's just going to get less expensive as time goes by. But the carriers need to use this information to their benefit by providing consumers with these problems that exist that would potentially contribute to a loss. Remember, loss is bad. Nobody wants to have a loss. The consumer doesn't, and the carrier doesn't. So if we can put together guidelines that the insurance carriers will give this information willingly, aggressively, I would say, to try and give the consumer the opportunity to prevent a loss from happening, it's going to behoove the insurance company. They're going to have less claims. It's going to behoove the consumer because they're going to have less losses. And at the end of the day, less losses translates into lower premiums. Even in California, I'm saying that, nobody's laughing. But that's the way it's supposed to work, right? So in closing, in general, I think this technology exists. It's not going away. It's been there. It's something that now we really just have to get a handle on and be sure that the information that is provided to the insurance carrier is clearly provided to the consumer and in plenty of time for them to take action to prevent the loss, to make changes, to do whatever they need to do to be able to prevent losses from happening, which again, beating a dead horse, because that's going to behoove and help everybody, the carriers and the consumers. All right, that's all I got for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to questions and answers here. And keep in mind, we have a couple of people from the technology side of this. We have consumer protection, we have the carriers, and we have agents. So we have a good spectrum. And so let me maybe ask the first question. And it kind of goes to at NCOL, we have over the years began to deal more and more with technology. And you started seeing that with telematics, then you saw that with predictive modeling, and you saw this with all these different other pieces that were going in to the underwriting. But it's been focused mostly on, with technology of aerial, has been mostly focused on claims and telematics on the underwriting. Are we seeing that start to spill over into the availability and cost? Availability and affordability, which is a big issue right now. So I'd like to kind of maybe hear, I know from the technology people, a lot of times I hear, well, we're just the tech people, right? We just provide the data. But as you provide that data, I'd be curious your thoughts and others as to where does this, I don't want to say end, because as Carl said, it doesn't end, but where does this find some place to land?
Yeah, so specifically your question is around, like, does it continue to get more commoditized and easier to access? Is that?
Yeah, and as we already are starting to see, carriers begin to use this beyond just claims,
Yep.
beyond underwriting guidelines. Now it's into availability and affordability.
Yeah, I think we're still early days, right? In the scope of things, I think what changed, aerial imagery, companies like EagleView and Google Maps, these have been used, for many, many years, as we've discussed. I think what's changed is that computer vision, AI, but specifically computer vision, has made it so that this imagery can be used at scale more consistently than just having a human look at it. And so I think why we're seeing the influx of news articles and other things is the use has gone up because the technology, specifically computer vision, has gotten to a point where it can be consistent. It can consistently say that this is tree overhanging a roof, right? So I think, to Carl's point, I don't think it's not going anywhere, right? The cat's out of the bag. Underwriters were using this prior to any of the technological advancements in the last 5 years. I think it will continue to get more cost effective. There's some limitations, like flying a plane over someplace every month is not cost effective for most insurers, right? So there's some limitations to this, but the quality is getting better. The technology to consume the imagery, so computer vision, continues to get better. And I think ultimately, as technology providers, again, we're the technology providers, as you said, but I think, at least for Nearmap, we need to provide tools to make it very easy to do the things that, like Amy is talking about, so that they can share this information with insurers. So I think we're going to see more of it, not less of it. We're going to see it. We've seen it on claims for a long time. We're going to see it heavily in the underwriting side. That's where I spend most of my time with carriers, on the underwriting side.
I just want to observe two things. One is, it's completely understandable that if this technology is available, you're an insurance company, you're going to want to use it, right? So I'm not here to say, we're not going to put this genie back in the bottle, and it's true, Google Maps have been around for a long time. But one of the biggest impediments to getting people to mitigate is that they say, I don't get a reward. They say, I went ahead and I replaced my roof and I still got dropped, and that's why I had number 4 in my proposal. So, that's one of the things that we really have to grapple with. And the other thing is, I think, we all have to remember that insurance works when it's a pool of diverse risks. And so if the insurers now can parse the best risks and then leave the risks they don't want that's why, you know, Colorado's having to create a FAIR plan, and more states are, you know, looking at their FAIR plans, you know, expanding. We've got a big challenge. You have a big challenge as public officials of, like, if we're eroding the pooling mechanism, you know, where is that going to leave us? Which is kind of the same question that the chairman asked.
Okay, do you want to respond to that, Carl?
Yeah, it might be useful. As far as underwriting goes, and to Amy's point, she's exactly right, that it becomes much easier to be more granular and say, we want this, we don't want this, we want this. We'll take this guy, but not his next door neighbor. Hopefully, and again, I'm in California where there's a lot of regulations and there's new regulations that are coming out, we'll be in a position where instead of just not accepting a risk that might not be as favorable, they'll simply price for that risk. They'll price for it. So your next door neighbor might pay less than you because they have a better, more fire resistant roof, because they've cleared out the brush behind them and under their deck, whereas you haven't, but not necessarily meaning you won't be able to get coverage. You simply won't be able to get the same rate as someone that has.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rudke?
There we go. I got to figure out how to run this. And this one is more just for curiosity as I listen to David and Dave talk about the aerial imagery coming from a fixed wing aircraft. And I think it was David had one where you had the roof with multiple roof lines and all this stuff, and you talked about the measurements. How exact is that in today's current equipment? I mean, it was quite a picture and such, but is that something you can go to the bank with, or how close is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the sort of 99% accuracy level. It is not to be a EagleView advertisement here, but I mean, it's the industry standard for roof measurements, both for insurance and for roofing contractors. So it's really precise and has pretty much eliminated people needing to hand measure. And I think that's the other distinction too, is like, how precise can you be hand measuring, and like how accurate are you going to be if you are scrambling around on a roof? And so there's just what's the ground truth, right? And EagleView has ended up effectively being that.
Okay, Representative Glorioso?
Thank you. My concern is this. You showed some photographs up on the screen showing people's roof lines, but also swimming pools. And with the increasing high definition of these photographs and be able to zoom in to see individual roofing tiles, what protections do you have in place to protect privacy? Because I'll tell you this, if you put a picture up with high definition and you happen to catch someone sunbathing in their backyard by their pool, in Louisiana, if you committed a felony, that's punishable by 5 years in prison. And the second you upload that to something that's shared anywhere, and it's going to be enhanced. And so what protections do you have in place to make sure that you're not capturing those images when I assume you're not giving any notice to the insured that we will be taking aerial photos of your house at this date and time?
I can start with that, and David might have some additional. You know, aerial imagery, again, is not new. So if you go to Google Maps, most of what you're seeing is manned aerial imagery. It says satellite, but most of it's actually manned aerial, right? So
But I use Google Earth all the time, and you cannot zoom in from an aerial point to the extent to see any type of, like, you couldn't see someone's face, well, at least what I have access to.
Yeah.
So you go to this higher definition where you can identify an individual. That's different than being able to say, well, yeah, that's my house, but I can't see an individual tile.
Yeah, so there is technology that blurs out faces and blurs out things like license plates and PI, you know, what people would consider PII. So there is technology in place to do things like that. But to go up a few levels, right? The use of manned aerial imagery and capture has been litigated to the Supreme Court. So there's current privacy rules in place around this. But you know, I defer to you, you know, to a certain extent on the alternative that gets put into some of these regulations is to send a boots on the ground inspector out. What protection is there for that person, right? You know, for the homeowner, right?
The homeowner knows when they're coming, and they're not going to go to my backyard without my permission, and I'm not there. So I think you could do the same thing in this case. If you're going to say, look, we're going to take aerial photos of your house on this date between these hours, then people will at least have notice, like, okay, I don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy anymore because I've been given notice they're going to take these high-definition aerial images on this certain time period.
Yeah, and I think those are all things that could be looked at. Again, there is regulations in place around manned aerial imagery already, and obviously we comply with all of those, and we'll continue to. I think there's a lot of other things to unpack, that go beyond insurance in your question, right, around privacy in general. But happy for the comments. I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to get into the means of that. But I don't know, David, if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I would just add, echoing Dave's comments, that the technology in terms of blurring PII and faces is something that we actively use as we get more granular in the resolution. So like if we go out, to get to sort of face level at this point, it's really a drone that is, and you have somebody that goes to the house and is inspecting a single house. We're not flying over a neighborhood. So your points about, well, I know, and I'm explicitly giving permission for the person to be there to fly your house to do the inspection. So you have the permission, and then regardless of that, we're also automatically blurring all license plate faces and things like that happen to get caught in any of the photos.
Okay.
Okay, next we have Representative Tedford.
I essentially had kind of the same question, but what I'll ask is, you had mentioned that you specifically asked permission. So what are states doing as far as requiring carriers to provide notice or get permission? Are laws like that on the books, or is this just a voluntary thing from the carrier community? I mean, my personal opinion as an insurance agent is, even if it's a physical inspection, I always prefer the carriers to give notice that someone's going to be by and when, and that type of thing. But my feeling is that drones have been flying over clients' houses with no permission or notice at all. But are states regulating this at all? And if so, what are they doing?
So I don't mean to get into semantics, but there's drones, which is going to be at this point, we don't have, the FAA doesn't give permission to fly drones over populated areas outside of the line of sight, except for with very specific exceptions, such as a catastrophic event or something like that. So on the drone side, you're only flying an individual house, at least from our perspective, and that requires scheduling with the homeowner. So there's never any sort of unsolicited inspection in that sense. The majority of the cases that I think that Dave and I both walked through in terms of what we showed on the slides is with our fixed wing aerial capture, and there is, to my knowledge, and I'm not a lawyer, but there's no notice given that we are flying a particular area to capture the imagery, and I think that goes to some of the kind of existing legal standards that we have.
So you're saying is that you're only dealing with the fixed wing, not the drones, but is anyone else on the panel have information on how drones are regulated, or whether any states are requiring permission or notice for the use of drones?
For drones specifically, I am not sure if states have any legislation. My experience has been that every carrier that we work with requires it. So I don't know if they're doing that out of obligation or just as best practice for how they want to engage with their policyholders. But that's the process that's followed every time we do any sort of drone inspection.
So I'll just add real quick. Representative Lampton from Ohio is not here, but he has a bill in Ohio specific to drones, specifically looking to capture the space below 500 feet, because above that point you're getting to FAA regulations. So it's rooftop to that piece. So he's at least started that conversation. That's one place that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any other states, but to answer your question, there's at least one where that discussion's kind of happening now.
And, kind of back to some of the privacy concerns, most of what we're talking about with manned aerial is 10,000 feet or above, right? And so FAA regulation, is that the drone, again, we're just flying the fixed wing manned aerial, so no drones on our side, but a lot of it, I think on the drone side is even federally regulated, but I don't know about insurance-specific notification requirements.
My understanding is that if it doesn't show a human being, there's a distinction. As long as the photo doesn't identify a person, or you can't identify a person, then I think that there's a lot more leeway.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next in a show of bipartisan olive branch, I'm going to call on the representative who disagreed with me in the last meeting, if you were in here, Representative Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you for being such a big person to see past that. This is a really big day. I'm glad everyone was able to see that. And I followed Representative Tedford, with whom I disagree every single day we're in the legislature in Oklahoma. So this has been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate you all spelling all this out for us. On the United Policyholders proposals, the first question is, does anybody have an issue requiring, with this idea of providing the consumer with copies of these? I've been one of those policyholders who's been non-renewed. I called it dropped for something that, and I asked follow-up questions from the inspector, and then like a few months later, that carrier announced that they weren't writing new business in Oklahoma. So it seemed to me more of like they found an excuse to not renew me, but then I was left as a consumer feeling like I had done something wrong. So I want to know about that, and then also whether, similar sort of vein, whether there are any concerns with this idea that maybe Representative Tedford and I could write a bipartisan law on requiring advance notice before high quality imaging were to take place, that expectation of privacy like my colleague from Louisiana talked about. So those two questions. Does the panel see any concerns with that proposal and with a similar proposal for advance notice?
No.
No.
I'll just say from our perspective, I'm not going to say yes or no, maybe. I think part of that is just the amount of time and the process it would take for an insurer in order to do that. In some cases, and I know it doesn't necessarily seem like that by some of the comments made today, insurers already are providing those to folks. So in that case, there's not less of an issue. But I can't speak for every insurer in the country, right? I mean, I only represent 1,500 of them or so. So, and there's a lot more out there. So obviously the devil's in the details, but it would definitely be a conversation worth having.
Yeah, and I think, Matt's in a better spot. I don't want to speak for the insurers, right? We enable them, they buy things from us, and we create technology. I think the technology, like the timestamp photo as an example, there's nothing in the technology that doesn't limit that. Personally, I think those things should be shared, and we should create technology to make that easy, right? And we are, right? That's on our product roadmap, literally, right? To help support some of these things. As far as notification for manned aerial, again, very different than notification for drone, right? So I just want to, the manned aerial stuff, FAA, federally regulated, all that kind of good stuff, used well beyond insurance. So some of our biggest customers, and I speak for David, are E911, local federal organizations using this imagery for that. So I don't want to speak for that part of it, and obviously can't answer for the insurers at all. But.
And then go ahead.
I was just going to mention too, oftentimes the drones are used on claims and on the front end, right? So in a way, the policyholder or potential policyholder is giving permission because they've filed the claim, so they know that somebody's going to come out to look at that, or they've applied for insurance. And the insurer, as we've discussed, is going to evaluate that risk. And the drones, obviously, as we've discussed too, is a little bit more of a one-off, whereas the fixed wing is a broader scale.
All that makes sense. I guess, yeah, when somebody files a claim, they are implicitly giving permission, but still the idea that, I know that on Thursdays, whatever, if my wife's doing something, gardening in the backyard or whatever, and it's sunny, just because we know that we filed the claim doesn't mean she doesn't want to be surprised by somebody walking around in the backyard or something like that. The next question, my last question is, this other proposal, giving reasonable time to an insured to correct whatever error came across. I mean, I think for sure, especially for like younger consumers who don't have as much experience in the market, to know that they're being non-renewed for something is going to freak them out and make them think that that's going on their insurance record or whatever they think it is. Giving them that opportunity to correct the mistake and get renewed would, I think, be a wonderful thing for consumers. So I wonder what you all think about that as well.
Carl might have some specific, I just want to say, you know, my previous life, I owned an insurance inspection company. So lived through some of the things that Carl talked about, right? This idea of issuing, they called them recommendations. So the inspector would go out, they would say, you know, there was these defects. They would send, the insurers would send that to the insured, and some of them they would say, we won't renew you unless you do this, or some of them were just suggestions. This framework exists, right? Many insurers do this today. I think it should extend, my personal view, it should extend to aerial imagery, but those frameworks exist and many insurers do it. Could they do it better? Could they do it better with technology? I think so. But the frameworks already exist for that. Maybe it's about scaling it, making sure we think about it with these new technological advancements. But Carl, you might have.
Yeah, just a couple seconds on that. I completely agree. If there's something that's being used to non-renew a policy, they should absolutely be given the time to make the correction. And again, it makes everybody happy because the carrier gets to keep the business. That's how they make a living, right? They write policies, and the consumer gets to keep their insurance policy. So everybody wins. There's one strange thing that I'm starting to see, and I'm not going to drop any names of carriers, that are saying that, well, even if they do the work, this is not restricted to aerial, this is just any type of an inspection that's done, they're saying, well, even if they fix it, we still don't want them. And the rationale is, we want consumers that are proactive to do things to try and keep their homes less likely to have a loss. And yeah, I'm not real happy with that one. I think everybody, you know, if there's a problem and you fix it, then you fix it and you move forward. But that's not specific to aerial inspections at all. But completely agree that if there's something that can be found that should be corrected, they should have ample time to do it.
Okay, thank you. Assemblywoman Hunter?
Thank you. We've talked for several years about climate and insurance and not having the availability for and carriers leaving different states. And so I sit here concerned about this, especially for folks, and it should make a difference what color state you live in and what party that you're in, that people don't have money. And the thought that, well, you shouldn't have a home, and if you can't, you know, make the repairs, is a very ignorant and naive thing to be saying today. And so if we think about populations of people who have homes that would love to be able to fix their roof if they had $20,000. You know, before COVID, interest rates were low and supplies were plentiful. 10 cars on my street last week were broken into. And so this affects everyone. And I just am concerned that this is another way for, even though it's been happening and it continues to happen and inspections were already happening before, that this is a way to just drop more homes. And I understand it's like, well, you know, they have to have businesses and that's how they make money too. We have an affordable housing crisis in New York, across the country. We have it. And we're seeing where insurance companies are not covering places where people are having affordable housing units. And so it just seems like we're not really holistically looking at a problem. This is just one piece of a whole larger, bigger problem. And I think it's just ripe for taking advantage of people who can't literally afford to fix their home. They could be making $200,000. It's just not something where someone's just indigent. And if you get your insurance dropped and you still are making payments on your home, you're supposed to, by law, you know, with the bank, have insurance to cover your home. And so someone says, okay, you know, we'll write you a policy, but it's going to cost more. People can't afford the more. And so I just think that we need to be having a broader conversation about this. I'm concerned about privacy. I'm concerned about the impact on doing this. We are the drone corridor capital in central New York of unmanned, manned systems. So I understand what's happening, but this is a big problem. And I think that there's a lot of consumer protection and there's a lot of broader issues that we're just not talking about. And I know that's not really part of the discussion today, but there's not one state that is in, the U.S. that's not having issues with this, and just more people being dropped is not going to, help, and insurers leaving, and then, we want to make sure that the best people are in the pool. If you have no people in the pool, you're going to be in these situations where the state is going to have to come up with these, different kind of fair plans or whatnot, and there's just not capacity for this. I think we need to just be thinking about this in a broader, bigger way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator McConkey?
Thank you. A couple just kind of quick questions. Is there anything in your mind, as states are looking at the potential of regulating aerial images, where this is fundamentally different than any other types of inspection? Or is there something that's key about this that needs to be kept in mind? Or is it essentially kind of favorable or good policy, in your opinion, to essentially duplicate whatever regulations a state might have of any other sorts of types of inspection and essentially apply it to this?
Really good question. I'm thinking there's an analogy in the medical context, but it's just not coming to me. I just keep going back to, like, if you've identified something very specific that is a problem for you as an underwriter, then let the property owner know what it is and give them that information so that they are not just going, wow, I've been with this company for, all these years and now I'm out and I don't even know why. And there are not, I don't think that all carriers are consistent in giving clear information to people about the basis for the non-renewal.
And I think just to build on Amy's point there, and that seems to be the case in all kinds of different types of inspections. So to your question, I don't know that it requires a different view of how you think about it than a physical inspection.
All right, Representative Furman?
Yep, thank you. Quick observation and a couple of questions. So, looking at the photographs or the slide with the pre-hurricane barrel and post-hurricane barrel, I think there's only two structures that sustain wind damage post-hurricane. And if you looked at the photographs prior to the hurricane, you could see one of them had a shingle missing on the rear slope that most likely wouldn't have been picked up by individual completing that inspection. But it also, anybody that knows anything about roofing could have predicted that home was going to be damaged by a hurricane because it was already losing shingles. So it's a very valuable tool for the industry. But I do want to get the insurance industry's take on this suggestion that you provide the insured with very detailed information regarding the factors that go into your property risk score. So I just wonder if some of that information would be proprietary. I think some companies may put more weight on things like roof ventilation. Some companies may put more weight on the age of the roof or proximity to trees or the existence of solar panels. So are there some concerns there? And then I'll just throw my last question out, because this is for the aerial imagery folks. In Louisiana, we settled on 24 months time frame because there was a concern and some testimony to the fact that, especially in rural areas, a photograph of that rural home every 12 months just was not feasible. So two different questions for two different panelists there. Thanks.
So answer your first question first, and very short, yes, there are concerns. We deal with these risk-based pricing type issues all the time, not just in property insurance, but also in auto insurance in terms of how insurance companies rate and price different risks. An insurance company may look at two different, or at the same thing 2 different ways. And starting to get into the place where you have to disclose those really starts to get into that proprietary information that really makes the property casualty insurance market competitive.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Walker.
There was a second part to, yeah, the question.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut the panel off.
Yeah, could you just restate that second question for a second?
Yeah, so in Louisiana, when we drafted.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the 24 months in the rural
Yeah.
areas, yeah. So, I mean, that is, it's fundamentally an economic question. So it's absolutely feasible to fly the entire country multiple times a year. I mean, there's economics involved, right, in terms of planes and fuel and all those sorts of things. So I agree with 24 months is a long time between sort of data points, right? So we'd probably advocate for sooner as well. I also think there's not, I mean, as evidence here, there's not just one aerial imagery provider. So there's ways to get coverage across multiple that helps with recency as well.
Yeah, you know, our model is one that we always fly everything multiple times a year. So if we fly it, but that doesn't mean every inch of the country, right? For economic reasons, as David mentioned. So, you know, for us, many areas we're flying 3 to 4 times a year. Flying it every month or flying it every week, that becomes economically probably infeasible for most insurers to pay for and other markets to support. You know, look, in a perfect world, you'd have an image from the day before the decision's being made, right? But you have to remember most inspections, so boots on the ground inspections, take 30 to 60 to 90 days, depending on which jurisdiction and what type of method you're using. So, you know, I think kind of back to, do some of the frameworks around inspections still apply here? Probably. You know, I think it's a balance of the technology and the economics. The technology can support it, of course.
If I may, just briefly, I can kind of make this question moot. It doesn't really matter how often they do it, as long as the consumer has the opportunity to either show them that that doesn't exist anymore because it's an old photo, or they have time to put on to make whatever the changes are. So if it's a 2-year-old picture and the roof looks bad and the consumer has the opportunity to be provided that information with the stamp and the time, they can say, well, that's not my roof anymore. Doesn't matter. Then it's really on the insurance carrier. Do they want more of that up and back, or do they want to spend more money to have more photos taken?
Okay, now Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm from Georgia. I'm an independent agent, and I'm involved with the Independent Agents of Georgia and met with the Personal Lines Committee on some of this non-renewal activity we're seeing in Georgia. I don't have a problem with the insurance industry using aerial technology. I think there's a ton of efficiencies and a ton of advantages and benefits. I'm pretty sure in Georgia we have some privacy protection already on the books with regard to drones. I remember a bill, I don't know, 6 years ago, I think we passed for that. My problem is the way the industry in this super, super hard market, I've been in the business 28 years, I've never seen such a hard market. The way the insurance companies are using the imagery or any kind of inspection, it gets really back to what Carl was talking about. We've got if it's a new policy, I think the carriers have 60 days. They can get off the policy for any reason in Georgia. But if it's a non-renewal, I think they have to give the policyholder 30 days notice, which is a pretty tight time frame if you've got a roofing issue and you can't get a contractor out there. So what I see happening in Georgia is certain carriers they've made a management decision to re-underwrite their book of business. We want to reduce our exposure in Georgia on homeowner insurance, and so we're using imagery and AI to call our less desirable policyholders, and they're not really given, if they do give a specific reason, like there's a limb overhang, and the consumer corrects it, then the carrier is still, they won't come off the non-renewal. And we've got to look at ways to build in some more consumer protection. I think if it was a normal market, it wouldn't bother me because there would be 5 other carriers lined up to write them. But in the market we're in now, you get a non-renewal, you might have to go into the pool, the state-backed pool. That might be your only alternative. So I'm interested in this isn't so much a question but a request of some, potential model legislation or an example of another state that's got this right, how we can hold the carriers, they can't have the moving goalposts like, well, you had algae on your roof, well, you clean the roof, well, now it's something else, and now it's this, and they're just trying to run out the clock and get off because they just want to pare down their exposure. So any comments, I guess, would be my question on that.
You're singing my song, so I'm just going to say amen. But also, when there's when you have, lots of competition, again, it's not, then okay, fine, this one non-renewed, you go ahead and, go with somebody else. But these days, my organization has had to go really dig into what are the non-renewal deadlines in the various states, right? To see like how long you have to shop, because that's become a really big deal, right? And some states have been extending. I think Colorado extended. We extended in California to 75. A lot of states still have 30. I think just as a threshold matter, we probably are going to want to give people more time to shop across the board. But then I think, if you're looking at this, how long, if we're going to, require the carriers to give them a time period to cure, does it coincide with the notice? So is it 75, they give them the notice and they have 75, or they have 30 days. I think what would be, what is reasonable to what kind of a time period is it? I mean, like to get a guy out, how long does it take to replace a roof? Or, limbing a tree is a lot faster. But things like creating defensible space or, putting roof tie downs or replacing the roof, that's not something that most people can do in 30 days.
Thank you, and I'll reiterate, before we go to our last question on this panel, I'll reiterate that there is, the Louisiana did pass some legislation around this, and that is in your book, as well as United policyholders giving us some suggestions. I think that, as I said at the very beginning, I think there will be a model that will come out of this. I think the Senator Walker has brought up a valid point on really the bottom line is consumer protections. Along some of in Indiana, I know along some of the regulatory issues, we've always put in, the right to correct. If one of our entities cites an entity for some violation, they have a right to correct it. That should carry over into this industry as well. So I look forward to some of those discussions and where this ends up. With that, we'll go to our final question from Senator Klein, one of our more senior members. Came here when it was just
button to push. Well, my buttons, oh, there we go. I've been here a long time. We've had a lot of discussions about a lot of things, but if some of you may recall, credit scores got to be a really hot button item here, and how consumers were going to be left out in the cold. But I think I heard the words here in the discussion, solely. And if we use this, once again, as a tool to help us reduce the cost to our consumers, but not using it solely. And I think we don't want to forget that, we're learning here. We're learning a lot of good stuff. And yes, how far technology has changed since I've been coming here. I get that. But I think whether Beth or Matt mentioned the word solely, and I think this is part of the discussion, and we as state legislators are going to go back and we're going to make this work, and we're going to make it work as it applies to our states. So I think that's, the word solely is, really important to me, and I think that's when we went home, we didn't want to use credit scoring, their score to be solely used, to determine whether or not we like them or not, or want to continue their, and I don't know if there's any comment to that, but I think I heard it from Matt or Beth.
I think solely was included in the Pennsylvania bulletin that Commissioner Humphreys issued. But the one thing I'll wrap up by saying too is in the development of a model, I mean, everybody's talked about this, the challenging hard market. I don't want to give the sense of, as we have a conversation around potentially developing a model, that that's going to fix the hard market. That's still going to be there. This is just a byproduct of that issue. So the broader issue is the challenging market that we're all facing and trying to navigate through, and aerial imaging drones is just a sidebar of that conversation.
All right, thank you to our panel. I would like to say, for those of you who are maybe here for the first time legislators especially, the thing I really like about these sessions are this is really what develops into then, hey, based on these discussions, where do we need to go as public policy makers? So thank you for your input. We'll continue these discussions, I know, as we move forward and see where this goes. I do want to remind everybody that from here, the Institute's Griffith Foundation Legislator Lunch will be in the Santa Ana room. That is for public policymakers and staff. And then we'll be back in this room at 2 o'clock for the Health Committee. And with that, thank you for attending.